Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We're really pleased and excited to welcome you to the launch of our new 5-year Violence Against Women and Girls strategy for the Bi-Borough, so that's Kensington and Chelsea and Westminster. My name is Shabana Gorsar and I am the strategic lead for ending violence against women and girls. And I've been working with a range of amazing partners for about 18 months in putting together this strategy. And we're really pleased to share it with you today and also have a conversation around what your role looks like in driving it forward. I'm not going to say too much because we've got some amazing speakers today, some brilliant videos and some really important messages from survivors as well. What I will do is I'll share my screen with you and just kind of go through the agenda and explain what we're going to be doing today. And then I'm going to hand over to our first speaker. So if you bear with me, I'll just share my screen now. Go, bring that up. There we go. Hopefully you can all see that now. So this is the launch event for the Bi-Borough 5-year strategy, and I've already mentioned that I'm Shabana. So next then is the agenda, and you can see we're going to be covering quite a lot today. The first thing I'm going to do is hand over to our councillors from Westminster and Kensington and Chelsea, who are going to sort of set the scene and highlight the importance of this work. We're then going to follow that by a short video featuring our celebrity councillors, which hopefully you would see has also been embedded within the strategy itself. We're then going to hear, very excited to hear from Nicole Jacobs. Some of you from our boroughs are probably familiar with Nicole in a previous role, but very excited to hear from her now in her role as the Independent Domestic Abuse Commissioner. Then it'll be back to me. I'll give you a bit of an overview of our strategy, not too much because you have been sent it and hopefully you've had a chance to read it, but really wanted to use the opportunity to highlight some of the key elements of the strategy that we're particularly excited about. And then it will be over to our amazing partners, really highlighting that no one agency has put this strategy together. It's been a real range of us together. And so we'll be hearing from a number of our partners. I'll introduce each of them when it comes to the relevant section on the agenda. So the first element will be the objective 1, which is BORG is prevented. We'll then hear from Tao, who will talk about survivors being supported, objective 2, Tao's for Women and Girls Network. We'll then show you a video of survivor voices, and this video is very much an important one which captures what we've been told by survivors about what they want to see both in our strategy but also our approach going forward. We're then going to hand over to amazing Sally from Standing Together, who's going to be talking about our partnership approach, which is objective 3, and then Katerina from the Domestic Violence Intervention Project, who's going to be speaking about objective 4, which is around holding abusers to account. And then we're going to wrap up by doing a quick interactive activity, which hopefully will work seamlessly online. And then it will be an opportunity for you to ask some questions. We're really keen to hear from you, and then we will close the event. So quite a busy session. Really hope you enjoy it and find it as informative as we hope you do. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hand over to our councillors who are going to just give us a welcome message from them both, followed by a short video of them, which, as I mentioned, has been embedded in our strategy. So let me stop sharing this. The joys of multitasking online. Close that down. And let me first bring Councillor Emma Will, who I will bring up. Ready, just a moment. Lovely. I will introduce, I'll let Emma introduce herself and hand over to Emma now. Over to you, Emma.
Thank you, Shabana, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join us. I'm going to be really brief and then hand over to Heather, my colleague in Westminster, and then you'll see the video. But really, we're just really pleased to be introducing today our new 5-year strategy, building on work that we've done in the past. Obviously, sadly, VORG is not a new problem, and it's not an easy problem. And I think we all know that lockdown has made it probably more of a problem, and certainly highlighted how difficult it is. But it seems to me very timely that we should be launching this strategy now, and looking, taking a fresh look at how we can try and end VORG. And we know we can only do that by working with all of you. So really, I just want to thank you again for all the work you have done and all the work we will do going forward. With that, I'm going to hand over to Heather. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma, and thank you, Shabana. And it's really just to echo what both have said, to thank you all for the work that you've done. Thank you for participating today. Do everyone have a look at the strategy document, because it does represent the joint work that we've done. And as both Shabana and Emma have said, that VORG is only something that we can tackle if we all work together, and we have a strong partnership, which I hope this afternoon will illustrate to you the strength of that partnership. So thanks again, welcome to all, and let's see what Kensington and Chelsea and Westminster can do to end violence against women and girls. Thank you. That's a bit terrifying, a still of me. Thank you, Shabana.
Thank you, Heather. Okay, great, lovely. Well, now we're going to show our video on which I will just load up, if you bear with me for 2 seconds, and I will bring that up for you now. Just a moment.
Welcome to our new Violence Against Women and Girls 5-year strategy. This strategy sets out our commitment, determination and approach to end violence against women and girls.
Sadly, we know that violence against women and girls is happening in both our boroughs. It's happening in our homes, on the streets, in schools and in public places. Nationally, we know that 2 women are killed every week by a current or former partner. Additionally, 1 in 5 women have experienced some kind of sexual violence since the age of 16. Locally, it is estimated that at least 1/3 of women will be affected by this at some point in their lifetime. In order to end this, we must work together. This strategy sets out what our partnership approach looks like.
No one agency or individual can end violence against women and girls. Instead, by understanding the role that we can all play in identifying and responding to violence against women and girls, we can help to prevent abuse, support survivors, and hold abusers to account. This strategy was developed with survivors of abuse, with residents, and with professionals. It sets out how we can tackle violence against women and girls through a coordinated community response.
Visit our website to download the full strategy and find out how you can help to end violence against women and girls. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much to both of you, and apologies if the video was a little bit delayed. I've got normally really good internet connection, but it seems like when I'm doing too many things it can slow down, but hopefully you got the key message from that. And as I mentioned, the video itself is also embedded within the strategy, and we will be sending a link out as well. So thank you very much to you both. Really important to hear your voices and see how this is very much a priority for the council across the 2 boroughs. Okay, so enough of me speaking. I'm now going to hand over to our keynote speaker, Nicole Jacobs. Incredibly pleased that you are here with us, and really pleased to invite you to speak about sort of the national landscape, really, but also your thoughts on our strategy, whether you like it or not. It'll always be good to hear, but also perhaps from your perspective, what as a partnership we can do going forward to really ensure that violence against women and girls stays high on the agenda where it should. So I'll hand over now to you, Nicole Jacobs.
Thank you, Shabana. It's wonderful to be here. For those of you who may not know me very well, I'm very familiar with the Bi-Borough because I've worked there for a long time. So I came to the UK back in the late 1990s, and I started working at an organization called Advance. It was just starting, a few weeks old at the time, and it had been helped by the setting up of Standing Together Against Domestic Violence, which is where Sally Jackson, who you'll hear from later, works. And I worked there for a few years, starting with that first kind of early IDVA provision at Advance, and some of the work in specialist courts that Standing Together was getting organized with partners, and also in health settings. And I went away and worked at other places and came back to Standing Together in, I don't know, maybe around 2014 or so, and was there as the chief executive for several years, and until I was appointed to my role that I am now, which is the Domestic Abuse Commissioner for England and Wales. And so I think of the Bi-Borough and obviously Hammersmith and Fulham too as very much my home away from home, and a lot of the work that I'm very inspired by stems from what you're doing. And I really truly mean that. I do think that the history of the building of a coordinated community response really, I mean, obviously you can find great practice elsewhere, but in terms of that coordinated effort and the amount of activity that happens, I think is truly unique in your boroughs and in Hammersmith and Fulham. And I really hope that you embrace and cherish what you have. It's never perfect. And in fact, I would imagine that the more you work and the more that you do, the more you realize you have to do ahead of you. And so I always felt like at Standing Together, we were always striving for, you know, the next thing and what would be better. But I do think it's worth you, especially as you're launching this 5-year strategy, acknowledging kind of how far you've come and what you've built as a partnership. And I do want to just say a very special thank you to Shabana. I've seen Shabana in action myself, and she's a natural leader and a really kind person, but very, very skilled and knowledgeable. And I think the Bi-Borough is very lucky to have Shabana. And one of the very first things that I did when I became commissioner is I commissioned a list of strategic leads at the local level, whether they were domestic abuse, violence against women and girls, kind of sitting in various places. Sometimes that is sitting, you know, these leads who are often commissioning, but bringing partnerships together and bringing that strategic conversation, the thread of that all together, can sit in different places. And it's been a real challenge of mine as commissioner, just to make sure that we're communicating to the leaders at the local level day in and day out doing this work, like Shabana. So Shabana, I consider you a model of people in your role, and so thank you. And I wanted to say a special thank you to councillors Will and Acton. It's huge, you know, the leadership at the local level in terms of councillor support for violence against women and girls, for domestic abuse, and all of the strands related is so important. And I think we can see that areas that really perform well have this kind of political leadership at the local level, and that is certainly something that you've brought to this partnership, and I wanted to acknowledge. And then for Tal and Sally and the rest of the Angelou partners, I mean, as I say, I speak about you all the time, I think it's a model of commissioning, bringing so many specialists together to really drive a response and bring all this expertise. It's incredible the added value that you bring to the Bi-Borough and Hammersmith and Fulham as well. You know, I'm sure that we could place some kind of a price on it, and it would be incredibly stunning to realize this added value you all bring as charities into these boroughs and for residents. But it's more the long-standing expertise and knowledge and specialism and the trust that you've built up in communities that we really have to value. So I just had to say a very long extended thank you and homage to you all before I start. Shabana, I absolutely love the strategy. I was looking through it today, and I do think it's a model of really bringing together the most kind of accurate aspects of information. What I liked also about it was kind of the myth busting and kind of getting to the basics. I think sometimes we overlook some of these things, and I think it's partnership. As a partnership in a strategy, we have to be really clear with the kind of the pillars of understanding that we're standing on. And I really like that your strategy does that. I obviously love that you've started off very early on with the voices of people with lived experience or who've been subject to domestic abuse, to violence against women and girls. And I noted a lot of synergy between what they were asking for and what I would tend to call the kind of key aspects of a coordinated response. So, you know, asking the question and having curiosity and putting their experiences at the center, thinking about the sustainability of our specialist services and their acknowledgement of how much they value those services, the training and the response to the whole family. And I hope that in some of the things I'll talk about in terms of our priorities at the Commissioner's Office and some of the government, the opportunities I see in government, that we'll see some ways to make sure to tie those together. So I absolutely love it. I love the idea of the partnership in how you've structured the way it models linking to other boards, linking to the operational work that you do. I just think it makes so much sense. And if anything, I would love to see so many more partnerships in England and Wales with this very kind of strategic and operational way of coming together. I think we often have these things as an aspiration, but we don't actually model how you achieve them. And I often say to government, you can commission services, and obviously we need to see more of that and a more sustained way of doing that. But we have to value how you bring partnerships together, who brings that work together, the coordination and the effort that goes into to that kind of coordinated response. It doesn't magically happen. So I think that you have a notion in this area of how to build that and how to sustain that by how you structure both the resource and the partnership. So well done about that. And I can't wait to come and see how things are going over the next 5 years. I wanted to tell you a little bit about my office and what we're doing, about some of the things that are happening nationally that I think are really well worth keeping in mind as opportunities, and how it really does link with your strategy. And for those of you who haven't followed the introduction of the office, my office was created as part of the Domestic Abuse Act, which passed in April. It was a long process, much longer than anyone anticipated. There was a proroguing of Parliament and a change in government and a pandemic, and there were a lot of changes along the way. But I won't go into a long lecture about what the Domestic Abuse Act brought us. It does some very key things, creating our first statutory definition of domestic abuse with children as victims in their own right, creating a definition that includes the whole range of coercion and control, including financial abuse. If you have, I'm sure you've probably had events and are very knowledgeable about what the Domestic Abuse Act does. My office has an implementation spreadsheet. It has about 90 some items on it, to give you a sense. And so one of the things that I won't do is go through all of that detail, but I would highlight that it created my office. It gave my office a statutory underpinning. There will be a domestic abuse commissioner, whether it's me or not, unless the legislation changed. And it gave my office a couple of important powers. One is the ability to seek information from public bodies and a duty to cooperate. So when my office seeks information from public bodies, they will have a legal obligation to provide the information that we've asked for. We have also an ability in the legislation to make recommendations to public bodies that have to be responded to within 56 days. And so we will use those powers to really bring together information to drive change. So even though my role says commissioner, I don't actually commission services myself. The whole idea is to do a lot of bringing together of information through the powers of the office to really drive change. And I see that as very much driving in all directions that creates a more coordinated community response. So our four key priorities of the office are: one, about more sustainable funding or creating sustainable funding for community-based services. And you will know, and I'm sure Tal and others will tell you, I know at Standing Together, we had so many multiple sources of funding, always having cliff edges of funding in front of us. There's just the way that our services have built up over time mean that they're never sitting in core budgets, and they're never sitting in a way that is sustainable and predictable. And yet we know that survivors in your area themselves talked about as a key priority the sustainability of these services and their need for them, and so do any number of frontline services. So police, housing, social workers, teachers, you name it, everyone will say that they really require kind of what the Angelou partnership brings to your area. And that's the same in any other area. And there is a lot of funding coming in, but certainly not in a way that is coherent whatsoever. So one of the things that we're doing is we're mapping services in England and Wales. We've been doing that all summer. We've submitted to the Treasury for a cross-departmental pot that would be for by-and-for services specifically, because I believe, and I know others probably would agree with me, that very particularly by-and-for services often not so much the case in your boroughs, but in many cases are not really prioritized as much as they should be and as much as they're needed in local commissioning. So we feel that we have to have a much more strategic way of funding those services. Through the mapping that we're doing, we're about 75% there in terms of all services in England and Wales. These are specialist services, I mean, for domestic abuse, and also wider issues of violence against women and girls. We've asked for the kind of breadth of services provided. We'll continue that mapping through to the spring, and we'll be producing a final report on that mapping. And we will certainly be advocating in the Victims Bill consultation, which just came out last week. That's definitely one for us all to put on our to-do list. We'll be strongly advocating within that public consultation for a statutory duty that would cover core community-based services, so that we have a much more settled way and predictable way that we fund services. We are also, and a second thing on a to-do list, if I could be so bold, is ask you to fill out our public survey that's directed to survivors of domestic abuse ages 16 and above. This is for England and Wales. We just launched this last week. We've had a huge response, but we need as many people as possible individually who've been subject to domestic abuse to fill out this survey. It's not about their particular experiences of abuse. It's very much about their experiences of services, or your experiences of services if you've been subject to domestic abuse. And we want to have that really front and center and really driving that mapping report. So the mapping report is kind of the factual information, and our survey that we launched last week is very much about hearing from survivors themselves, kind of how, as you've done in your strategy, to really be clear, what did they find in services, and also very importantly, people who have thought about services but haven't sought them and understanding why, or maybe people who've tried to get to services but haven't really had what they needed, and really to understand that. And there's all sorts of questions we want to answer in that mapping survey. So please circulate that amongst your networks as much as you possibly can. A second priority in our office is migrant survivors. So the Domestic Abuse Act did a lot of things, but it did not provide any kind of support for migrant survivors of domestic abuse. And so that is very much left undone. And it's, as a result, a priority, a key priority for our office. So we've been working with government on whether or not there should be a firewall, which I believe there should be, so that no one would fear information being passed along to immigration services about them, particularly through the police, but also that provision of service. So it really ties to my first priority and the mapping that we're doing. We believe and have said to government, and will continue to say, through the spending review already, but also in any meeting, and particularly with this victims bill consultation on community-based services, that we need a very specific by and for pot of funding, and that would include migrant survivors. We're commissioning a piece of work now. In fact, we've just commissioned it to do a bit more research and kind of modeling of the quantitative data that we need to say to government, this is kind of how much funding we think you need to set aside for this particular group of people. So we've already commissioned a couple of reports, but this is another report that is much more specific to the kind of population modeling, because we want to drive that decision in the right direction as much as we possibly can. A third priority is family court. I know that without a doubt, in your area and in every area, we hear an overwhelmingly consistent, sadly, story of a lack of recognition of domestic abuse or understanding of domestic abuse within the family court. There's a whole range of actions in something called the Harm Panel report that was published by government, by the Ministry of Justice. All very, very good recommendations. Some we have starting a couple of pilots of more inquisitorial models of family court, so less adversarial. There are all sorts of things happening, none of which are really affecting family court right now. So there's some great recommendations, and there's some great kind of future direction potentially. But my concern is what's happening in the family court today. And we need much more support for people who are going to family court. And I think that's somewhere where some of our Angelou partners could come in and be much more welcomed, and much more of a standard role in supporting people through family court. That's a huge priority of mine. And we've been asked by government, and we are creating a reporting mechanism for domestic abuse within the family court. So you can look on our website and you'll see some various bits of our mapping work that we've already done in terms of LGBTQ+ survivors, child and adolescents who may be using violence against their family members, but also our first stage of report about how we'll have this oversight with family court. And we have just on Friday commissioned out a further kind of designing of all the information you have to get to. Sadly, it's not all sitting in one court file, and we're hoping to launch that reporting mechanism in the spring. So lots of work ahead there. And very last is our oversight mechanism for domestic homicide reviews, suicides, and the whole range of other reviews that will often have domestic abuse findings in them and actions in them, like coroner's reports, mental health reviews, child safeguarding reviews. So what I would like to do is create and am creating an oversight, so to find out, are those recommendations and actions getting done, and if not, why not? So it's a very good use of the powers of my office. A few things that government is doing. I mean, keep in mind, I'm not party political. We're independent of government, but a few things government is doing that I think are really important to tie into your discussions today. One is, obviously, we have the Violence Against Women and Girls strategy. This government chose to separate out and have a separate domestic abuse strategy, which should be published in the new calendar year. And alongside that, I think at any time would be the Domestic Abuse Act statutory guidance. All of those things will have many there should be a strategic tie between those documents and what you're doing, but also we will be looking to see government, and certainly we will be making sure that that we have some oversight about the resourcing of those strategies, and also the Domestic Abuse Act statutory guidance implementation, to make sure that we're getting the most out of those things as we possibly can. I've mentioned the Ministry of Justice Victims Bill consultation. I can't underscore that enough. This is a very, very rare opportunity, and it stemmed from amendments within the Domestic Abuse Act process, where there was a proposal to have a statutory duty for community-based services. In the Act, you'll know we already have accommodation-based services as a duty, and £125 million was set aside from the Treasury in order to fulfill that duty, because government was placing a burden on local areas in that way. I and others wanted that to be extended to community-based services, and the government didn't accept that. But what they did offer was that there would be a consultation in the Victims Bill. And so that is quite a rare opportunity, and that will be running for the next 8 weeks. It was just published last week, so it's something we should all be starting on the new year, certainly with. There's also something that I think is two other things that I think are really worth noting. One is that this week we'll have Maggie Blythe, who's our National Police Chief Counsel's lead for violence against women and girls. You might remember she was very newly appointed. It's a new role, full-time role, and she will be publishing the VOG and policing framework. And that is a really important thing for us to look at. Think about how that, what the implications are locally, and really join that up in terms of your incredible operational groups in the Bi-Borough. And last but not least, and it won't come online as quickly, but the serious violence prevention duty, which is part of the policing bill. The government, I was advocating for this change, but the government has changed that part of the bill itself, so it will be part of the serious violence prevention duty to consider domestic abuse and sexual violence. Some people, and I think this is really understandable, really worry a bit about giving the police too much of a driving role in a serious violence prevention duty, which is really about kind of implementing a public health response, looking at the kind of ways of preventing crime. But I think that in the guidance and in the way that this is set out, and importantly, the way it's implemented in a partnership like yours, this should really be implemented well, is about bringing in wider partners and really making it not so much a criminal justice only response, but that kind of wider community-based response. So I hope that you'll find, and I hope that you'll adopt sexual violence and domestic abuse as part of your priorities in the serious violence prevention duty work that you'll be doing in the future. I'm sure that is well above my time, Shabana, and I hope that that helps. I hope that helps you to kind of connect some of the work you're doing with what's happening elsewhere, and I hope you feel the connection. You certainly always have an open door with me at the Commissioner's office, and all I would say is, you know, no matter what I do, the most important work is what's happening on the ground and with people individually. So I just have to thank Tal and Sally and so many others on the call for what you're doing day to day, and the partnership that you're creating by far and away will have the most effect. So thank you so much for having me, and have a wonderful rest of your event.
Thank you so much for that, Nicole. Thank you firstly for your kind words. They really do mean a lot. And secondly, thank you for really setting the national landscape and rightly highlighting that the local response must feed into that, but also we must learn from what's happening nationally as well. So I'm really excited to sort of go through our strategy, but I think your point was really important, which is that we know the landscape is changing and it's really important that our strategy and our strategic approach is flexible to that as well. So when I go through the next slides, really please highlight what I really want to highlight is that, you know, this isn't a stagnant document. This is something that we will be reviewing on an ongoing basis, amending where necessary, making sure that we're always responding to need. So thank you again, very kind words and really helpful context, which I'm going to draw on when it comes to our local response now. So just on the back of that then, so what I wanted to do was just kind of speak about our strategy itself. But before I went through it, I wanted to just give you a little bit of background as to how we came about producing it in the way that we did and who was involved in the development of our strategy. And this is really important because, as I mentioned before, really want to highlight that no one agency or one partner can end violence against women and girls. It's got to be done in a collaborative way. And so over the last 18 months, we've been holding a number of different consultation and co-production sessions, including stakeholder workshops with professionals, both partners from our statutory services and our voluntary sector as well. We've really made sure we've heard from the voices of survivors, and that isn't just us sort of, you know, jumping in and then leaving, but looking at how we can create ongoing, meaningful ways of having conversations with experts through experience. We wanted to understand what our residents felt, what their concerns were, what they wanted to see. So we did a survey with residents. We ran a number of workshops where it came to actually developing the framework that underpins our strategy. So we ran a workshop to develop our theory of change model, which I'll be presenting to you shortly. And then we also ran sessions with, you know, within our governance structure. So with our Borg strategic board and the number of operational groups that really deliver this work, which again, I will be speaking about briefly. And so here's our strategy. We hope that you have found it helpful to read and insightful. It covers quite a lot, and it just to kind of give you some key highlights there. It's got a slight introduction. What is violence against women and girls? We've included really important what experts through experience, or people with lived experience have told us. We wanted to include the local picture. So what's the data that we currently have and how are we going to use that data to drive our approach going forward? What is our approach? What frameworks do we use to direct our work? What are our objectives? Really including the journey of a survivor, how we're going to deliver the strategy, the way forward, and then the conclusion. So don't worry, I'm not going to go through each of these one by one. I'm just going to highlight some key points before I hand over to our partners who are really going to speak about our objectives and why they're important and what that means going forward. So what I wanted to start with, and again, it sort of echoes Nicole's point around what is violence against women and girls. And I know it sounds like a really basic place to start, but we really wanted to use this opportunity to both kind of explain why it happens and also some of the myths around it. There's a lot of reasons why violence against women and girls happens, or there's a lot of reasons why people think it happens, but what we know is that it's rooted within gender inequality. And so we wanted to really frame this with that knowledge and use both European and United Nations insights to kind of inform our local approach. And then we really wanted to have some myths and some truths in there as well, because we know sadly that there are many misconceptions around violence against women and girls. And this strategy is not just about highlighting our direction, but also using it as an opportunity to raise that awareness. So don't worry if you can't read that. I've just kind of copied it for visual effect. As I mentioned, you have the strategy itself. And we really wanted to hear from experts through experience. So from our conversations, these were the main four themes that came up from our conversation. They wanted professionals to ask the question. So speak about domestic abuse, not be afraid about raising it as an issue, and understand that if someone's presenting to you or your service with an unrelated matter, how actually it may be domestic abuse is also something that they're experiencing, or violence against women and girls more broadly is what they're experiencing. So to ask the question was something that they highlighted. They wanted training for professionals across a range of VORG themes. They felt that there were some elements of VORG, such as domestic abuse, where perhaps there is more awareness, but there's other areas like sexual violence or forced marriage where there needed to be more awareness and understanding. Again, echoing the point that Nicole made, but they really wanted sustainability of support. So it wasn't just having support then and there, it had to be ongoing, long-term, beyond that crisis response. And then really important, what survivors also told us is that they wanted the needs of children to be met within our response. And so it's really positive the new Domestic Abuse Act highlights the impact of abuse on children, but we need to think more broadly about how we can ensure that the voice of the child is very much central in our response. And so just some quotes here, which I'll read to you briefly, which came directly from survivors. So training and awareness needs to be raised amongst professionals, but also more widely, so everyone understands the issue. We need to make sure professionals, friends and family can identify abuse and understand how to ask and respond. The needs of children and young people must be recognised within the strategic response. Their voices must be heard and shape provision. And support needs to be long-term, intersectional and needs-led. Professionals need to work together so that the right support is in place. And so what we also wanted to understand is what's our picture and what do we currently know? And of course, what we do know is that the stats that we have are very much the tip of the iceberg. And sadly, violence against women and girls and the range of types of abuses that come under this umbrella term largely go unreported. And so the key thing we want to do as part of raising awareness is to support people to come forward. However, what we do know is that violence against women and girls is prevalent, and the data on this page, and again this is within the strategy, really highlights just how prevalent it is. I'm not going to go through each of these, I just kind of wanted to share them as a point, but there was a few which I wanted to highlight, and the one there is around our referrals into the Angelou Partnership. So hopefully you're all aware that the Angelou Partnership is our specialist service that we commission. Nicole's already mentioned them, nationally recognised as best practice. What they've been seeing is an increase year on year of referrals into the service, which is a good thing because we want people to come forward, but also recognising that in a climate of funding issues, how that can also be a challenge for our providers. So really pleased to hear about the national direction of that sustainability of funding. And then in the graph next, you can see just the range of different needs that the Angelou Partnership look to address. So thinking about supporting survivors with children, survivors who have disabilities, survivors who are from the LGBT community, different age groups, as well as from racially minoritized backgrounds. So really understanding that there is really no one victim, and so our strategic response needs to be intersectional and needs to understand how to meet that diverse need. And then lastly on this page, before I move on, as part of our resident survey, we really wanted to understand our residents' experience of violence against women and girls. And as you can see, in terms of personal experience of street harassment, really high numbers of people sharing their experiences, as well as their concerns around feeling unsafe, particularly at night. And so our strategy was very much about understanding this need and responding to it, making sure that we have oversight of these concerns and making sure that we respond to it. And as I said, this must be on an ongoing basis where we review the strategy in light of the changing landscape. So very briefly then, what is our approach? I'm not going to say too much about the first diagram because my lovely colleague Sally is going to be speaking about the coordinated community response, but I'm sure you're all aware of it, or I hope you are. It's very much the framework that drives our response and highlights that everyone has a role to play in ending violence against women and girls, but that's all I'm going to say. I'm going to leave Sally to speak about that. And the second diagram there is our ecological model. And the reason why we included this within our strategy was it kind of complements and reinforces the coordinated community response, but it really highlights that when it comes to responding and ending violence against women and girls, it's got to be a tiered approach. So absolutely, we've got to look at how to support individuals, but it's thinking about the role of communities, wider institutions, and then really key, that role of wider society as well. So again, really important that Nicole was here to sort of speak about what's happening nationally, because of course it's important what we do locally, but it's got to link in with that wider picture. And so throughout the strategy, we've highlighted what we think this means for each of our strategic priorities. And then this is our theory of change model. Again, don't worry, I'm not going to read through each of it, but I really wanted to show this to you because as a partnership, we came together and had a conversation around what is it ultimately we want to do. And even though it seems to be very ambitious as a goal to end violence against women and girls, we felt that we had to have that as our goal because that is ultimately what we are striving for. And so the theory of change very much focuses on how we want to do that. And we do think that if we work as part of a partnership, this goal hopefully can be achievable. The other reason why we had this goal is because if one person is able to provide support to somebody who's experiencing BORG, then in a way for them, we have been able to achieve this goal. And so absolutely, it's about looking at that individual and that system-wide approach as well. And our outcomes are to prevent violence against women and girls, to support survivors, to ensure that we work in partnership and to ensure that we hold abusers to account. And as I mentioned, my colleagues will go through what this means, but what I wanted to highlight at this point is these outcomes and these priorities have very much come together off the back of conversations with residents, professionals and survivors. And then a really important thing within our theory of change was to highlight the actual problem we're trying to address and recognising that there are barriers in place. So this isn't going to be smooth sailing. We recognise it's going to be challenging. What we wanted to do was by identifying those barriers and identifying the issues, we can work more actively towards addressing them. And so what I wanted to do was just speak very briefly about the problem that we've identified locally as a partnership, which is that BORG and the threat of such violence exercised through individuals, communities and institutions in both formal and informal ways violates women and girls' human rights, constrains their choices and agency, and has a negative impact on their health and their ability to participate in, contribute to, and benefit from development. So really taking a human rights as well as a public health approach to understanding violence against women and girls. What I've done is I've taken a copy of the journey of a survivor. Again, I'm not going to go through this in too much detail, but the reason I wanted to share it is because what our strategy wanted to highlight was what we are doing well, but where there are opportunities for us to improve our responses. And so through the journey of Sarah, we can really see where some of those missed opportunities are and where we can really focus the attention of our partnership to better meet the needs of victims and survivors. And so Sarah, which is not her real name, but is a real case study, really highlights that the barriers and challenges that victims of BORG experience, how BORG intersects with experiences of substance use and mental health and housing, and that we've got to have a multi-agency response to meeting the needs of Sarah, who was eventually supported. But if we were to strengthen our partnership, there would have been earlier opportunities to provide that support. So again, this case study is in the strategy, but I wanted to take a moment just to highlight the importance of understanding that journey. Okay, and so this is our governance structure. So this is the body that's really going to oversee and hold this strategy, and is what it's ultimately going to be held to account to ensure that the strategy is a success. And so what we wanted to do was avoid the kind of hierarchy structure that sometimes you tend to get when it comes to looking at a governance structure. And instead, we wanted to have almost like a planets model, because we understand that each player is incredibly important, and we kind of work together in this bubble, and we need to support each other. So you can see there, we've got our Violence Against Women and Girls Strategic Partnership Board, which consists of that strategic and senior level officers. We've got 6 operational groups that really drive that work forward: our risk and review group, our health group, modern slavery group, harmful practices, housing and children and young people, and making sure that these groups feed into the statutory boards. So our Safeguarding Executive Adults Board, Community Safety Programme Board, Health and Wellbeing Board, as well as our local Safeguarding Children's Partnership, and we'll shortly hear from our colleague from the LSEP regarding prevention. And then really important, what we wanted to do was ensure that the entire structure is held together by the voices that we really need to be hearing. So specialist services, these are organisations that have been working in ending violence against women and girls for a very long time on the grassroots and have that specific insight into what that support needs to look like. And also experts through experience, so people who have that lived experience shaping and really holding together our governance structure. So really want to spend a moment just talking about that, because it's important to understand who's going to do the work as part of our coordinated community response. Okay. So that's it from me. I'm now going to hand over and introduce each of our colleagues who are going to speak to each of the priority areas. So priority 1, VORG is prevented. We're going to hear from Emma Biskupski from the LSEP. Priority 2, ensuring that survivors are supported. We're going to hear from Tao from Women and Girls Network. Priority 3, which is about that partnership working, we're going to hear from Sally from Standing Together. And then priority 4, we're going to hear from Katerina from the DVIP project. So really pleased that you're here. Thank you so much. And I'm going to hand over now to Emma, who I believe is on mute and cameras off. So if you can pop them both on, Emma, then I can send you to the live screen. And it makes life just a bit easier. So just 2 moments. Great. OK, I will send you onto the live screen now. Thanks, Emma.
Always helps if you remember to put your mic down, doesn't it? Hopefully you can all hear me all right. I've had no end of technical issues this morning. So yeah, I've been asked to talk about the first strand of the VORG strategy, which is about prevention. And really, I want to link that to what that means for us in the Local Safeguarding Children Partnership, or the LSCP for short. Bear with me 1 sec, because my slides have now just disappeared. More technical glitches. So you'll see, if you've had a chance to look at the VORG strategy, you'll see that one of the things that we want to do there is to increase the knowledge and understanding across all our communities around VORG issues, and to ensure that all of our partners and stakeholders understand what their roles and responsibilities are in relation to helping to end VORG. And one of the ways in which we do that is through a training programme. We have, through the LSCP, recognised obviously that violence against women and girls is a really important topic, and it's indeed, we share many of our objectives with our Violence Against Women and Girls Partnership. And so we do a lot of raising awareness of VORG issues through the LSCP training programme, and we have a whole range of workshops that practitioners and volunteers across both boroughs can attend, and those workshops range from domestic abuse workshops through to topics such as FGM and other harmful practices such as forced marriage and so-called honour-based violence. We have in the LSCP long recognised that domestic abuse is a big topic of concern for our children and families in both boroughs, and it remains a large reason behind referrals to children's social care and the front door. And as Councillor Will highlighted, the impact of lockdown was something that all of our colleagues were rightly concerned about during this pandemic that we've been experiencing. So domestic abuse is one of our priorities in the Local Safeguarding Children Partnership, as well as being a key focus for the Violence Against Women and Girls Partnership. We have a number of areas of work that we want to tackle when it comes to looking at domestic violence and domestic abuse. But one of the areas that Shabana asked me to talk about was a programme of work that we're undertaking with colleagues mainly in children's social care, but also with partners in police and in health and in the voluntary sector, and that's the Safe and Together model. And this is a framework that is helping us to upskill practitioners to be able to better partner with the non-abusing parent and to help keep them and their children safe and together. away from perpetrators. And so we do that through a range of training and workshops and follow-ups with them, and that will continue to be rolled out in the next year or so to colleagues across the partnership, and we're really hopeful that that will help us to further improve our approach to tackling domestic abuse in both boroughs. We also have a range of other priorities that fit in with the VORG partnership, and one of those is our Safer Communities priority across the LSCP, and that's about ensuring that children and young people feel safe in their communities, including in schools and youth clubs. And one of the areas of focus that links in with one of the spotlights on best practice in the VORG strategy is around the Healthy Schools partnership and working with educational settings and others to understand their role in sort of developing a whole school approach to domestic abuse prevention. So you can see more of that in the strategy itself. And one of the things that fits in that we're doing with the LSCP that we will feed back into the VORG strategy and share with our VORG partners is some work that we're doing in our Children and Communities Engagement subgroup. When we went and presented our priorities to them, some of the young people in a variety of the forums that we attended spoke very eloquently and were very passionate about raising awareness about young people's relationships and safety within their own relationships as young people. And we've got a couple of volunteers from our youth councils in both boroughs and from one of our children in care groups who are really interested in helping to provide a voice for our young people. And it's so important that we listen to the voice of young people, as Shabana was saying earlier. So that's one of the things that we will be doing to help partner better with our VORG partnership, is to share the feedback from those young people and to see how we can further develop a programme of work to take that forward. And I've just lost my last slide, so forgive me, but essentially those were the two key things I wanted to share, that we have a crossover between our priorities between the Local Safeguarding Children Partnership and the Violence Against Women and Girls Partnership. Continues to be a really important priority, and it's wonderful to see so many people come together and listen and learn together, because it's only through partnering together that we can help take this work forward.
Thank you, Emma. Sorry, let me just get myself set up. There we go. Great, thank you so much for that, Emma. Really helpful, particularly thinking about linking the work that we're doing around violence against women and girls with wider partnerships and not working in silos. And a really key point, of course, Emma's very much focusing on children and young people, but within the strategy, what you can see, what we've highlighted is recognising that preventing violence against women and girls absolutely must include work with young people and supporting young people, but also thinking about how we can work in a preventative capacity with adults as well. And so our work will include that. And if you're interested in finding out more, please do have a look at our strategy. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hand over to our second speaker, which is Tao from Women and Girls Network. I'm going to bring up Tao's slides. Tao, what I'll do is I'll bring you onto the screen, and then if you can just kindly give me a little bit of a nudge, I'll make sure that I move your slides when you need them to be moved. So let me just bring you up first and then get your slides. There we go. And I'll send you to the live screen now. Thank you, Tao.
Okay, thank you. I'm assuming I'm on the live screen. I can't.
You are, yes.
Okay, brilliant. I'm really sorry, everyone. I had to log through my iPad because my laptop would not let me log in. So apologies for the weird angle as well that you see, like my forehead. It's because I'm on my tablet. So I'm Tal. I'm the Advice Service and Helplines Manager at Women and Girls Network. Shabana, if I can have the next slide, please. Just a very brief who Women and Girls Network are. So we are a Black-led feminist organisation. We have been providing specialist wraparound support services for over 34 years now. Services support any self-identifying women, girls and non-binary people who have been affected by any form of violence against women and girls. Our services include an advice hub, casework support, sexual violence helpline. We run the West London Rape Crisis Centre. We provide both therapeutic and practical supports. Our founder and clinical director, Kima, she describes it the most beautiful way. She says it's just like a little hug from Women and Girls Network that survivors get when they come, and access our spaces and our services. So I use that every time now because it's nice. We are part of different partnerships and we work in partnership across the whole sector. And as Nicole and Shabana and Sally will talk about it afterwards as well, we're part of the Angelou partnership, which means in the Bi-Borough and in Hammersmith and Fulham, we deliver the advice hub support, which is the first access into specialist support in the two boroughs, and we also deliver specialist sexual violence and young women's casework support. I'm going to be talking a little bit about what is the role of specialist services both within the strategy, but just generally within the world, within our spaces, within what we do. Sabrina, if I can have the next slide, please. So the role of specialist services, if kind of to put it in a very one sentence, is to work alongside survivors, to amplify survivor voices, to provide support which enables survivors to regain control, because we know that violence against women and girls is all about, power and control, and losing control within a situation, as in not an abuser, but women survivors having the control taken away from them, both by the perpetrators, but also by bigger structures that I'm going to talk about in a minute. So we are there to work alongside survivors to support them to regain control, to thrive, and to basically be the agent of their own change, which means achieving what they want, how they want it, and when they want to achieve it. I'm so sorry, that's my door buzzing, and it's going to stop in a second. Yes, so this is our role within what we do, but how do we do it, and what are the key kind of ethos and principles under which we would like to work when we deliver this kind of support? So firstly, like been mentioned before, we are survivor-led. When we say survivor-led, this means we know the survivors are the expert of their own experiences. We know that they are at the heart of everything that we do. So when we say they're at the heart of everything that we do, they are not just their own kind of individual package of support that they receive from us is being guided by what they want and how they want it, but also our services are designed by survivors for survivors. They will dictate what support we deliver. They will dictate how we deliver it, and they will help us shape the support that we are delivered to make sure that it's truly reflective and truly responsive to needs of survivors who are accessing our services. We talk about intersectionality. I'm sure we all kind of hear the word intersectionality. Well, what does it mean for us in reality? Is that we know that women will experience different types of vogues, likely to experience different types of vogue towards throughout their lives, but also we know that women will have experienced other forms of oppression and discrimination and lots of isms, in their lives. So racism, ableism, ageism, and we know that all of those experiences intersect in women's life, and they will then be will determine what type of support women need and how they want to access the support and how they'll be able to, or not to access support. So when we're thinking about women's experiences and when we're thinking about, survivors who are coming and accessing our support, we think and we look at the person as a whole. That's why it says holistic with H, but I put holistic with W on purpose because it's the whole person that we're looking at. And that's the idea. You can't, although women come to us or survivors come to us, looking to access support around violence against women and girls experiences, we work across all of their experiences throughout their life and throughout the different spheres of their identity, because we know that just focusing on one kind of narrow sphere of identity does not then translate into effective support that survivors are able to engage with. Like Audre Lorde, my love, said, there is no such thing as a single issue struggles because we don't live single issue lives. And that's the same, and that will shape the support that we are offering. The support needs to be trauma informed. When trauma informed, that means that we understand how trauma impacts, survivors' lives and how it will impact on how they present themselves, how it will impact and how it will manifest in the way they interact with our services, but also with the world. And when you do that, and when you work alongside survivors to support them to understand that as well, then that's where you see magic happens, because that's when you see women who are really able to transform, to evolve, to change and to progress and to reconnect with themselves. So in the strength within, which is, like it says over there as well, strength-based work. So we always focus on women's strengths and ability. We honor, we celebrate resistance, and we celebrate strength within our work with survivors, which then cause transformation, in survivors' outlook on their lives, in survivors' outlook on themselves, in survivors' ability to connect and interact with their spaces and with their environment. The support has to be flexible and adaptable. One size fits all just doesn't work. It doesn't work for anyone. You have to work around individual, unique needs of each survivor and their, unique presentations. It needs to be needs led, and it says, and I really like, Shabana, that you put it in the strategy about it needs to be long term. That's what survivors and residents told us. It needs to be long term. It needs to be sustainable. It needs to focus on survivors' needs and not just crisis and immediate kind of urgency, but rather, if we want to see sustainable change, we need to invest in long term services, and our support needs to be that as well. Can I have the next slide, please, Shabana? It needs to be representative and reflective of the communities that we work with. So it's very, very important. And like Nicole said, specialists, maintaining specialism within our sector, maintaining and ring fencing support for by and for specialist organization and organization that work with specific marginalized communities is key, because there's no such thing as one organization that can, support and adequately and effectively support all survivors. That just doesn't exist, and that's why partnerships are the key, most effective way to provide that support for survivors of VOG. We work within Women and Girls Network within a kind of broader rights-based and social justice framework. So even though our focus and our specialism is around support around violence against women and girls, as I said earlier, we understand that other oppressions happen within survivors' lives, and we work within that broader framework and understanding. And the most important thing, like, our spaces are not meant to be those kind of clinical, cold spaces where women come and get support they need, and we are the experts and they are the survivors. It doesn't work that way. Our survivors need, our spaces need to be warm. They need to be a place when women come and survivors come in and feel solidarity. They feel they are heard. They feel they're validated. And that's how we create. We talk about revolutionary love a lot in our work, because love is important. Love of self, love of the women and survivors that we work with, the people that we work with, that creates and generate change into the world. And we talk about everyday activism. So when we work alongside survivors, when we speak to them, we actually tell them that their act of resistance, their act of day-to-day resistance is act of everyday activism. So their way of handling themselves in the world and kind of reigniting and reconnecting with the strength within them, and then sharing that with the spaces around them. This is everyday activism, and this is the type of activism that end up changing the world. Shabana, can I have the next slide, please? So as I said now, so our role, obviously, our key role is to support survivors, work alongside them. We're not doing, and it's very important, we're not doing to and we're not doing for, we're doing with women and survivors and people that we work with. So it's not us, the expert, at doing for, is we're just there to really bring back out the kind of the power and strength within survivors. And it's our role also to actively challenge and reframe attitudes, because even though we're looking at supporting survivors, we're also looking at changing the world. And like Shabana said, our end goal is that our services are no longer needed, really. And I know it's counterproductive for me because I'll be out of a job, but I'll take it if it means Vogue is eradicated from the world. The way to do that is support survivors on a one-to-one basis, but also kind of reframe and rechange and reimagine attitudes and all of those structures, of patriarchy, of oppressive systems that really hinder women and girls from accessing the rights and the powers that they're entitled to. When we challenge those, when we do it on the individual level, but when we also do it on a broader, bigger level. So when we're sitting in with commissioners, when we speak into government, when we are, demonstrating outside number 10, when we're doing all of that, this is how you change the world on a one-to-one basis, work with survivors, but also on a kind of broader activist way of challenging those systems of oppression. When we provide this kind of support that is truly based on and embedded on those kind of principles I was just talking about, that's how we generate long-lasting, sustainable change, both in survivor lives, which then leads to them feeling strong enough and able enough to rebel against all those big systems I was just talking about. And then slowly, chip by chip, we're dismantling, the kind of those systems that perpetuate Vogue. And we always say, one survivor at a time, we're creating ripples of change within our society, because survivors then go back into the world with this new, reimagined, reconnected understanding of their strengths and of their rights and of how the world should be, for women and girls. And they share those new understandings with their friends, with their children, with their families, with their spaces they interacted with, their work colleagues. And slowly, we're seeing a long-lasting ripple of change across the different communities and the social spaces that, the survivors, that all of us, operates within. And when we do that, this is where, we all, women and girls, feel safer. They feel free to be themselves. They feel they have the equity and control of the different social spaces they are part of. And this is how Vogue is going to end up being, gone with in this world. And this is what we're all really working towards. So I know I talked a lot and I talk fast because I know I'm running behind. But basically, this is what we're all working towards. And I said, I always kind of at least put 2 quotes of Audre Lorde. So my second one for this one would be, the revolution is not a one-time event. So we're rebelling against, and we're creating a revolution one survivor at a time. And if we all do it in our spaces, both within our own communities, in our work, but also in our personal life, and be actively challenge all those systems of oppression, Vogue will not exist anymore eventually. I think I forgot to say flick, Shabana, so I'm sorry. I talked through all my slides, but I'm still in the middle of my slides. If you got any question, or if anyone wants to understand a little bit more about WAGN or the model that we work with within Angelou and within Women and Girls Network, we got a very specific model that we have developed that we work across, which is it's very similar to the coordinated community response, but it's looking at the kind of like the work with the individual. I'll be very happy to share any more information or talk about it. As you can see, I can talk about it for days and days, but I'll end there. Thank you, Shabana.
Thank you so much, Tao. I can listen to you today, so don't worry about that at all. And no worries about your slides. If it's okay with you, we will send the slides out with a kind of in a follow-up email, because you've got some brilliant content in there. And it'd be great to still see that. So thank you so much for that, Tao, and thank you for sort of really highlighting what the value is that specialist services bring to ending violence against women and girls, and supporting survivors. So before I hand over to Sally, what I wanted to do now really was just to show a very short video which highlights what survivors have been telling us, and it sort of segues quite nicely to what Tao has also been talking about, which is the importance of hearing survivor voices. So I'm going to share my screen and just play a short video, and these are direct quotes from survivors on what they want to see, but also sort of starting with what their experience has been. So I'll play that for you now shortly. Bear with me a second. So that was just a short video with some really important voices of survivors, both sort of highlighting what some of the challenges are that they faced, but also what it is that they think is helpful going forward. And this is very much the way in which we want to be working. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to bring Sally Jackson to talk to us about partnership working. So if you bear with me 2 seconds, I will get myself all set up. Here we go. And then I'll bring in Sally as well. So Sally's going to talk about partnership working, as I said, and Sally is our partnership manager. So she's probably the best person to speak to about partnership working. And she is from Standing Together. I'm sure you're all very familiar with Sally. I'm just trying to get my silly face off the screen and bring the lovely Sally in, but it's not letting me do it as smoothly as I would like to. So let me maybe start again. There's Sally's face. There's that. There's another button. Sally, over to you.
Thanks, Shabana. So yeah, guys, it's tough to follow that, isn't it? I mean, in essence, you know, the words of the survivor are it. That's why we do it. That's what we want to achieve, is to provide the best possible support and services for them. And what we firmly believe across the 2 boroughs is that the best way to do that is by working in partnership. As Shabana says, I work at Standing Together, and we've been working across the boroughs for over 20 years now. And we were so fortunate that 20+ years ago, we were able to bring a woman called Ellen Pence over from the States to talk to us about the coordinated community response. And that was a way of working that was quite different to anything we'd done in the UK before. And we were delighted to be able to share that way of working and share that practice across the UK, so that we all got much more invested in working in partnership to end male violence against women, rather than trying to do the best that we could, but as individual agencies. So currently at Standing Together, we coordinate the Marrocks across the 2 boroughs, and we also coordinate the specialist courts. And that, as I say, goes to our history of partnership working across the 2 boroughs. And that's something I think that is a real great strength for us to build on, because we're not starting from scratch here at all. We've developed some really good relationships. We know that our partnership working has to work across all levels. So Emma mentioned earlier about the Safeguarding Children's Partnership and how some of our priorities align, because by keeping children safe, keeping families safe, keep women safe, and we help to prevent and deal with violence against women and girls. But of course that goes the same for the Safeguarding Adults Board as well, and the Health and Wellbeing Board and our Community Safety Programme boards. All of us have, if they want to achieve the objectives and the priorities that they have, then they have to have violence against women and girls on their agenda as well, because it cuts across so much. Equally though, with our grassroots communities, we know that we are informed, thankfully, by our wonderful specialist services that are on the ground talking to women in the communities about what's needed, how they want to have those services developed and delivered to them, and whether or not it works. We get that instant feedback because we have the brilliant services that we have across the two boroughs, and it enables us to take the response to survivors rather than expecting them to come to us and fit our model of care. We're much better as partners at being able to create a flexible option for them to access support. And of course, and it's been said this afternoon already, we recognise that violence against women and girls is not an issue that just the Criminal Justice Service or just the women's sector can solve. These crimes affect our housing, our health, our access to other forms of community support. Of course, it has effect on our children and their education, and it goes without saying our safety. So it's not an add-on to other services work, it's an essential part, be that the statutory services or the voluntary sector services. If they're working with the public, then they need to be working and knowing how to respond to violence against women and girls. And we know locally from the work that we've done that both our professionals and also our community members want to have that knowledge and those skills and the confidence to respond appropriately when someone discloses some form of violence against women to them. And of course, survivors deserve the best response every time a disclosure is made. We know how hard it is to get the courage to talk to someone and to ask for support. So as a partnership, we really want to make sure that any time that happens, they get the best possible reaction to it. Can I have the next slide, Shabana? Thank you. So Shabana mentioned this model that we've been working with the strategy, looking at the ecological bubble, and really starting at the bottom there with the individuals, both individuals that are experiencing violence against women and girls in some way, but also those that are working as individuals to try and end it. And as we've said several times, what we know is the best professional in the world is not going to be able to solve this issue on their own. The best agency in the world is not going to be able to solve this issue on their own. So we need to come together to bring those approaches together. And what we know about our communities as well is, of course, that work is already happening. It's not as if we're bringing the work to the community. We know that communities already have really good support systems, and we need to make the best of those. We need to build on those. And importantly, particularly with some of our minoritized communities, which unfortunately have often had to get on and provide supports themselves, well, we can learn an awful lot from them about what works and the most effective way of supporting those communities. And of course, we always want to improve on it to see how together we can provide a better service for those people. We've built some trusted relationships, and of course, partnership working is about relationships. It is about finding those ways to work together, looking at what our shared agendas are, as well as some aspects of our work that will be quite different. But what are the bits that we can come together and make the best of the resources and the knowledge and the skills of different aspects of the partnership? But it is, of course, essential to have equality in those partnerships. And around the table, we'll find that we have some agencies perhaps that are there and have resources that they're able to invest and may hold some power because of that and their ability to invest in that way. But equally, we will have partners around the table that have the knowledge and the skills to lead this work. And what we recognise as a partnership is both are equally valuable and both are equally necessary. We know that the specialist services and the survivor voice, especially those that are less often heard, are essential if we're going to develop the best ways to ensure that sustainable practice is embedded and part and parcel of what we provide. And we need to not just hear those voices, but listen intently and act upon them and make them part and parcel of our strategy. And one of the things I think we've done really well in developing this strategy is really take on board what local women with lived experience have said to us has been important to them. And of course, we need to remember the end game. As a whole society, we know that survivors and perpetrators exist in all areas of society. And if we're going to end that, the only way we can do that is to come together. And the next slide, please, Shabana, thank you. So I'm aware there are some colleagues from Standing Together on the call, and I know I'd never be allowed in the office again if I didn't mention In Search of Excellence, which is a research report which I have to say we are incredibly proud of and really do believe it's a great practical support and guidance to anyone who's working in partnerships. It can be helpful to an individual agency that's thinking, how could I contribute more to this partnership? But also helpful to partnerships themselves to work through and thinking, you know, what are we doing well as a partnership? What are our areas of weakness and how could we support that? It really is, you know, if you're working in partnership after today, just get to our website, download it. You'll definitely make good use of it. Now, when you get our strategy, the new strategy, you'll see as an example of partnership working, we've used a whole housing method. And of course, that makes sense because it shows us how different aspects of the partnership come into play to help a survivor throughout the entire journey that they may experience. But I suppose what this slide is showing us is in some ways it could be whole housing, it could be whole health, it could be whole anything, because as Tal related to, what we're talking about is developing services that have a whole person response. We have to think about all the aspects of somebody's life that has been impacted if they've been subjected to some form of violence against women. And the only ways we can meet those diverse needs is with a robust partnership. So I suppose to finish, what I want to say is that we need to absolutely ensure that we've got that intersectional focus, which we can only achieve by a diverse partnership, making sure that our services are women-centred, trauma-informed and needs-led, and work towards getting that sustainable long-term change that really is a living, breathing, coordinated community response. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sally, and thank you for sticking to the time as well. It definitely makes my life easier, but managed to say all the key points you needed to. So really pleased to hear from you. And thank you so much for really highlighting the importance of a partnership approach, because we can't end VOG without it. I'm going to now hand over to our final speaker before we sort of do one final activity together, hopefully pending technology, and then move to wrap up. So I'm going to hand over now to Katerina. Katerina is an amazing colleague who's been doing amazing work around what is recognised as quite a challenging area, which is looking at holding abusers to account. And this is our fourth priority of our strategy, and something we really thought needed to be included, as we know that unless we address the root cause of the issue, we're always going to be firefighting. So I'm going to hand over now to Katerina, who's going to speak to priority 4, holding abusers to account.
Thank you, Shabana. And I will start by referring back to the strategy, and the first sentence in the strategy that refers to abusers that says ending violence against women and girls can only happen if perpetrators stop their abuse. And that pretty much in a nutshell says what I have to say about this, which is if we are working to stop violence against women and girls, we need to also be working for perpetrators to stop abusing women and girls. And a lot of what both Tal and Sally have talked to us about around partnership work and about supporting survivors, all of that would be unnecessary if the abuse wasn't there. And so I can't stress enough how relevant it is for the goal to end violence against women and girls to work with the perpetrators. And in my view, one of the issues that keeps coming up is the othering of the perpetrators, is seeing the perpetrators as someone who is over there. It's not relevant to me. I don't work in the area. I don't know anyone that has been affected. That is really not my concern. And the reality, when we start looking at the statistics and when we start talking to people, is that the domestic abuse and violence against women and girls is all around us across all specters of work, all layers of society. The perpetrators we work with are all sorts of people of all classes, all ethnicities, all educational levels. And so othering really isn't useful. And when we talk about abuse being everybody's business, that is what we mean. And different professionals in different capacities do need to be upskilled and prepared within their capacity to have challenging conversations and to hold perpetrators to abuse. And by that, I do not in any way mean that everybody should be doing behavior change perpetrator intervention. That is not what I mean. That's why we have specialist services such as mine, and that is why commissioning these specialist services is relevant. But there's a long way before someone is ready to engage in a behavior change perpetrator service. And that is the likelihood of that intervention to succeed is related to whatever else is happening. And if as a community and as a society, we're looking to hold people accountable, we will be preparing them to become more accountable, if that makes sense. So there's a bit in the strategy around organizations that I think is particularly relevant. The majority of the employers I speak with do not have policies and procedures around how to address violence against women and girls when it appears in their ranks. And if people are asking the questions, they would be finding out that it does happen in their ranks. So there's something, I think, aligned with this strategy that has to do with organizations stepping up and developing policies and procedures in this along these lines, as is the training of professionals. So Safe and Together has been mentioned as and can continue being mentioned as good practice. It is a splendid program, and it does put in very simple terms the priorities that help people stick to them. I will just, and because that relates directly to me, highlight that we can put, and we should put, all of the systems and partnership things in place, but we do need to come back to the individual. And as Tal was saying, one survivor at a time, I will say one perpetrator at a time, because that is how we change things, is by impacting this one person to change their behavior and to be respectful of their family and the women in their life. And that is one at a time. And every time we affect change in one, that has a hidden impact, or every time we fail to do that, that will have a not hidden impact. And I think, in a nutshell, because we are running behind, Siobhan, I'm very aware of that. I think those are the key messages for me. So services in place to support behavioral and attitudinal change of those using abuse. Training to upskill professionals across all areas to better address and challenge abuse when it crosses their path in whatever it is that they do. Abuse is everybody's business at a professional level and at a personal level. And there needs to be an awareness raising force around this, and advocating for systems change across all levels, family courts, but not only family courts, across all levels. So yeah, so those were my basic 4 around holding perpetrators to account.
Thank you so much, Katerina, and just to say thank you again for the work that you do around supporting abusers to change their behaviour, because it's such an important aspect of our work, and it's something which we know we need to do more around, which is why we wanted to highlight it in this strategy, because it's important for us to understand what we need to be doing as a partnership and working collaboratively with agencies such as yourself in shaping that's really, really key. So thank you so much for that, Katerina. So what I wanted to do was just kind of spend just only a few moments talking about going forward, because what I want to highlight is obviously what we've just set out to you is very ambitious, it's quite high level, and in and of itself looks like it can be very difficult to do. And so what we want to highlight is that this vision will be realised through a robust action plan. And so we're actually working at the moment with partners, and we'll be picking this up particularly after Christmas, because I think we can all do with a good break after the heavy year that we've had. To really look at developing this with residents, with survivors and with multi-agency partners in line with those 4 strategic priorities which we've been mentioning. And this action plan will be published in early 2022, and from initial conversations, as well as what's already been covered by all of the colleagues presenting today, what we want to be making sure we also capture is that work with schools in a preventative capacity, around projects which focus on increasing street safety, on real focused work with survivors from minoritized backgrounds and those who experience what we call multiple disadvantage, so experiencing VORG as well as having perhaps substance use needs, mental health needs, housing needs, etc. To, as Katerina said, work in changing perpetrator behaviour, and then really focusing on improving systems and referral pathways. So absolutely excited about launching the strategy, but for us locally now the work really begins, and it's how do we make sure that our strategy is realised through that action plan. And we really wanted to kind of look at ending this event by bringing you in. I know with a live event it's difficult because we can't see or hear you, but there are ways that you can be involved, and we're going to finish with it with a Q&A. But what I wanted to do now, if it works, bear with me, is I wanted to do an activity using Mentimeter. So Mentimeter is an interactive tool. You can get involved in 2 ways. You can either scan the QR code, and if you scan that QR code, which I'm going to do myself now, it will take you through to a page called Mentimeter, and you can see that ultimately we've just got one question which we're asking you that we want to hear from, which is what do you want to see in our action plan? For those of you who are struggling to follow the link through the QR code, I will pop the email, the web address into the Q&A chat, and the code you can see there is 26569952. So I'm going to stop sharing that. And I'm going to open up the actual web page now, where hopefully your responses should start to come to light and will be captured through a word cloud feature. So I'm going to bring up the word cloud feature now, and please do contribute and jot down what you think you would like to see, and we should be able to see that in real time. So let's, oh hooray, it's working. Okay, great. So we can see people want concrete actions, they want funding plans, brilliant. They want things to be trauma informed, you want to hear survivors' voices, you want to have justice in courts, absolutely. You want to see workplace support in place. Resources, again, is really coming up quite strong. You want to see justice. Now, this is an interesting one because obviously we want justice in courts, but we also want a broader sense of justice. And what we've really been hearing from survivors is that justice, absolutely criminal justice, is one element, but there's other forms of justice as well, including community justice. So that's a really important one. We hear that we want to hear the voice of young people come through. That's really important. One of the things that we're conscious of in our strategy is it's very open to all, and what we are in conversations, particularly with colleagues working with young people, is having a strategy that's kind of dedicated to those voices. That's really important. Having perpetrator work funded, we absolutely know this is imperative, and this is a challenge that we're seeing up and down the country in terms of funding. So really hoping that some of the conversations that is happening nationally through Nicole's team is about having that dedicated funding for work with perpetrators. But what we also want to do locally is bring together our expertise and sort of look at what we should be funding and what that need is. So really great to see that highlighted. Sexual harassment is coming up. This is really important, particularly in light of, I would say, the last 2 years, where there's been a real emphasis on safety in public places, recognising that when we talk about violence against women and girls, there can be perhaps an overemphasis on domestic abuse, but there needs to be space for the wider strands of violence against women and girls. We've got the CCR, so the Coordinated Community Response. Yep, really making sure that that's something which we promote. I've got lots coming in now. I'm worried I'm missing things. More work with schools. Absolutely, we need to be working with young people. And this is important because I think this isn't about going into schools and telling people that they may be in the future be either a victim or they may display abusive behaviour. Actually, no, it's about what does it mean to be an ally and to support that changing culture. But as Sally also said earlier, how do we also work with adults as well? Because I think that children and young people have a massive role to play, but like the environment, they shouldn't be the ones who are cleaning up our mess. So what role do adults play as well as part of the strategy is important. Prevention, again, lots of repeat around that. And one of the things I should have mentioned is the larger the word appears as this word cloud works, the more it's being inputted. So thank you for that. Trauma-informed, definitely there. Male victims, absolutely. And within our strategy, one of the videos we've included is support for men and boys, and recognizing that when we use the term violence against women and girls, you know, it can appear to be exclusive, but really highlighting that actually that's the UN and the national term, but it includes violence against men and boys and non-binary people, but recognizing that we have to use this term because it disproportionately impacts women and girls. There was a few more that jumped up. Borg, not just DV, absolutely. Making sure that our action plan has accountability for the action, absolutely. Really want to make sure that when we develop our action plan, it's not just 1 or 2 agencies who are leading it. It's got to be everyone, and we've got to make sure that we hold them to account in the nicest way possible, of course. Education, HR policies, counselling, safe and together, early help focus, more work with young boys, time frames. I'm assuming that means making sure that they're realistic and tangible, and mental health support. It feels like it's slowing down, this word count, but for those of you who weren't able to get involved through the QR code, please do feel free to write down anything you would like to on the Q&A function, and we'll make sure we capture this. But it's really brilliant to see what you want us to focus on our action plan, and that is not wildly different to what we were hoping to include in it anyway. So really pleased for that. Thank you so much. Okay, so after all of it's been a very stressful morning trying to get all this technology to work, but really pleased to say thank you so much to all our amazing speakers and for your contribution. We've got some time now. Really wanted to use this as an opportunity just to kind of open it up to you, whether you've got any comments or questions that you would like to ask either myself or the last standing women. We've had a few people who've had to slip away, so we've got Sally, Tao and Katerina here to sort of answer any questions that you have. As I mentioned, you can use the Q&A function. Just type in your question and then we can answer it for you. And I'll just give you a moment to do that because no questions have come through yet, which means we've answered all of them already, which is brilliant. But if you do, please do jot it down. Do you know what's interesting? The word cloud is still going. Okay, great. I'll make sure I don't close that down and we keep that live and keep that going so that people have a chance to contribute to it. So, any questions from anyone with all the information we've just chucked your way? Give myself a chance to breathe as I wait for those questions to come through. And just while we're waiting, just to let you know that the strategies will be uploaded onto both Kensington and Chelsea website and Westminster website. What I'll be doing is following this event with an email with slides with all colleagues who are happy to share. Slides will be included, links to the videos will also be included, and also links to the website as well. So yes, that will be on its way. Still looking at the word cloud, which is still moving. Okay, great. It looks like nearly everyone who's attended has contributed to it, so that's really appreciated. Thank you. Okay, I don't see any questions, which I don't mind because I'm absolutely knackered. So I'm going to look to wrap up on that note. If you do have a burning question, you've got my email address. I just wanted to say thank you so much to everybody. It's been really difficult, I would say, in putting this strategy together whilst we're in a global pandemic, whilst working from home, whilst having 101 things to do at the same time. So just a massive thank you to particularly our third sector partners who are always stretched beyond capacity, yet still find time to make sure that our partnership is working in the right direction. So really looking forward to working with you all more in 2022, particularly in developing our action plan and really getting on with the work. But really want to just wish you all a lovely break where perhaps we don't think about anything too heavy. We just watch rubbish TV, we just sleep and we eat lots, because I know that's basically all that we need. So thank you so much. Thank you for somebody. Yep, someone's just said that they enjoyed the event. Great, thank you so much. Please take care of yourselves. It's important that we do this work, but we can't do it if we're exhausted ourselves. So take care of yourself. I give you permission to finish for the day and look forward to working with you in 2022. So thank you so much, everybody, and hopefully see you in the flesh next year. Take care, everyone.